welcome everybody to this climate tech panel focused on carbon removal in particular. This is a panel that is hosted in partnership with Xooglers @Co, which is the ex-Google community. So that's really the sort of the invited audience. I know there's also other non-Xooglers or Googlers here, and of course, I mean, you know, really welcome here. I'm not going to kick anybody out. You snuck your way in and get a little bit of a sneak peek on what's going on behind. So that's just great. It's a busy week. There is a lot of climate stuff going on. There is the World Economic Forum in Davos, and there's also the conference in Barcelona, and I'm sure there's many other things going on. So I really want to thank you all for making it here. And I want to start out by actually, you know, I could introduce the panel, but I'd rather invite each panelist just to say a couple of words about themselves in getting started. And then I have prepared a couple of questions, and then afterwards we're going to do some audience questions as well. So I'll just start by you, Robert. Do you want to start out by just saying a couple of words about yourself?
Sure. So I work with carbon removal and climate policy, partly as an independent advisor, but I work a lot with Milky Wire Impact Platform, where I manage something called Climate Transformation Fund that puts money into effective climate solutions in carbon removal, but also nature restoration and decarbonization as an alternative to offsets, focusing on the impact that's created. But I also write a lot about carbon removal and try to follow it very closely.
Really great. Thank you, Robert. And Robert, just for the participants, where can they, like, where is the best place to find you and check out what you're doing? Is that like, are you mostly on Twitter, LinkedIn, or where do they best find you?
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn, I think. I have a web page as well, but Twitter and LinkedIn is definitely where I write most. Yeah, and a Medium page where I collect my writing as well. I can post it all in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert. And okay, let's move on. Sergey, you're the next one here on my screen, so I'll invite you to just say a couple of words about yourself.
Thanks, Martin. So honored to be here actually in this panel. And my background is pretty much from technology and financial mathematics, and I've only started like working on impact the last maybe 2 years. But we had some early experiments on tokenization of carbon and natural capital even before that. And now we are at Linder, we're trying to build some kind of an upstream and downstream for high quality carbon removals. And we're focusing heavily on mangrove projects, mangrove restoration. And on the tech side, we focus on tokenization and make a fair market for carbon products, including the spot and forwards, like the future carbon as well.
Yes, and also I want to share, Sergey, I know you didn't quite mention it here, but you were part of the one of the first tokenized projects for tokenizing trees, the tree coin, and that later became the Mangrove DAO. And I think that's yeah. So you were like really on the journey, on the Web3 journey from the very beginning. So really, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Thank you. How about you, Eftimia? Do you want to go next?
Yes, thanks. So hi, everyone. My name is Eftimia Salo, and I'm the head of carbon projects at Compensate. Compensate is a Finnish startup which provides companies and individuals with high quality carbon credits. So I have been for the past 2.5 years, so almost since the start of Compensate, and I'm managing the carbon capture portfolio. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Eftimia. And really, I wanna just acknowledge you and what you're doing at Compensate. You're saying it's a Finnish startup. I think I somehow think of you as an NGO and like kind of like a beaming light in the sort of clutter of information in the carbon industry. I think you're doing a tremendous job there, and you can actually, for any participant, you can click onto the Compensate website and you can see their bank statements. And I think, you know, you're really taking matters in your own hands and standing for like a transparent future. And I think that's something you can be really proud of, and I want to acknowledge you for that. So really, thank you.
Thank you so much. Lovely to hear.
Thank you. All right, Alex, how about you?
Hi, my name is Alex Cooley. I'm a general partner at a small venture capital firm called Zero Carbon Capital. Actually founded the firm with my wife about 3 years ago when we left Google. And we invest in kind of very early stage science-based solutions to kind of the big, hard to decarbonize parts of the economy. So looking at things that can help us decarbonize agriculture, industry, long distance transport, and obviously as part of that portfolio, we also include carbon dioxide removal as we're looking at it.
Amazing, amazing. And Alex, I just want to congratulate you also with the first close. I know you closed the first or had a first close earlier this year in April, I think it was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we raised our first fund a couple of years ago, which was just kind of a small fund to get into the market here in the UK, and we're now kind of raising our first grown-up fund, which has been really fun. And yeah, we did our first close of 10 million in April, and then we're continuing to raise through the rest of this year. But that first close means we can get back to investing, which is much more fun than fundraising. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you, Alex. I know you're really busy, and I really want to thank you for taking the time to be here, choosing to be here today. And hopefully, here's an invitation for the participants who's here. So we got Alex, of course. So arm yourself with great questions, and I know we also had Bob, who's a partner. I think you said, Bob, you were a partner at a VC firm in London, also not particularly investing in sustainability, but maybe we can talk about the opportunities of that at the end here, and then maybe some openings for you and some of the entrepreneurs on the call. Okay, great. Let's actually just jump straight into it. And I just want to get started by kind of opening up the conversation a little bit. IPCC, they launched their report earlier this year, and one of the things that they spoke about for the first time was carbon removal, in particular, as a must-have for the solution for the climate change challenge that we're faced with. And they have a little graph of some of the technologies that we can use nowadays for carbon removal. And my first question is really what about where we're at with the state of carbon removal, and what is your top 3 suggestions for carbon removal and why? So this is a question that I'd like to ask the panel here, and I'll just kick it off by playing the ball over to you, Iftimia, and hear from your perspective.
Thanks. Yeah, actually at Compensate, we decided in December last year to phase out our avoided emissions projects and focus our portfolio towards carbon removal. And we do that for many different reasons. The biggest ones are that it is much easier to calculate the benefits for the climate when you have, for example, a reforestation project which restores degraded land, so the baseline is 0. So you cannot, in a way, overinflate the impact of the project. What I have seen is happening with many conservation projects, for example. So that's the reason. And also, of course, SBTi net zero standard is also focusing on removals, and we see this shift in the market demand towards removals. And the second part of your question was about the 3 suggestions I would have.
Yeah, what is your, from what you see, the different carbon removal technologies, and some of the things that was there in the IPCC report. I mean, it's a 3,000+ page long report, so you may not have found that one, but in fact, I think you probably have. But where it talks about technology readiness of the technologies, the sequestration potential of the different technologies, and a couple of other the criteria that I noted down here that I thought was interesting was those 2, and also the cost, the current cost, and the potential cost in the future, and also the permanence and the additionality. So what would be your top 3 portfolio?
Yeah, well, at Compensate, we're following the Oxford principles for sustainable offsetting. So of course, we need all carbon removal, but at the moment, the reality is that the market is quite depleted. And we start with nature-based projects, so with community benefits, and most of our projects are also community-led, because it's not just the climate crisis, there is a biodiversity crisis. These projects are in the poorest countries, so people need to benefit. Otherwise, it just becomes a carbon colonialism when you just trade their carbon and they don't receive anything in return. So our projects have direct cash payments to local communities. In one of our projects, which is reforestation, people get 70% of the carbon credit revenue. And in our second project, people get 90% of the carbon credit revenue. So this is something we really like to see in the projects we support. And so reforesting degraded lands, restoration, mangrove projects, that's our top priority at the moment. We are dedicating 20% of our portfolio for so-called innovative projects. And therefore more projects which are developing their methodologies and they're not so well established on the market yet. Also, the price is much higher. At the moment, we have biochar there, and we have also an ocean carbon sequestration project. So we really, having seen all the issues with the traditional conservation projects, we feel that we have to support these innovative projects, even though they're not so much developed yet.
Got it, yeah. So, and yeah, what I was saying, reforestation, that was the first one. Biochar was the second one, or sort of new developing technologies that you want to support in, I suppose, the development of them. And also the last one you mentioned, mangroves you mentioned also, and you also mentioned ocean-based yes. Solutions. Yeah. Okay, great. And Robin, I see you perhaps unmuted yourself, or maybe you were off mute already. Maybe you have something that you want to say to that? Or like kind of what's your top 3 portfolio? What's your perspective?
Well, yeah, I can speak for hours about that topic. But I mean, looking at the IPCC, they don't have like a particular portfolio. They just try to list all the solutions that are available. What they didn't list perhaps was woody biomass sequestration. So like burying biomass, which is coming up now, and Puro has a protocol for that, which is quite promising actually. So, I mean, they lay out the alternatives and sort of describe where the state of knowledge are. And carbon removal is like extremely early. Like you have nature restoration solutions that also sequester carbon, but only in the short-term carbon cycle. So to actually reduce the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere and sort of make up for the fossil fuels, we also need permanent carbon removal. And that is very, very early. We basically don't have anything. If you count biochar as a durable long-term carbon removal, which I think you could, but it's slightly uncertain, then maybe it was 50,000 tons removed last year and sold as carbon removal. And that's like, I mean, it's so little that you can't even like compare it to anything. 36 billion tons of CO2 was emitted. So it's such an infant, it's really in its infancy. And I'm comparing it to the solar industry in the 70s. It's comparable in terms of like market volume and penetration. But was a lot of buzz around solar energy in the 70s as well. And it took a long time, it grew fast, and carbon removal needs to grow actually a lot faster than solar and wind did to reach the sort of volumes that we need it for. But the market is not really there yet. It's I constantly compare the carbon removal market to basically Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Like you can make an advanced support to a project that you think is good and probably going to pan out. You might buy a book for like several $100s because you really want to support that offer. So you're giving that kind of pre-support to make a project happen, to get new technologies tested, to get pilot facilities built. All of that is not going to pan out. Some of this is not going to work. We're going to bump into unknowns that we had no idea or we're not even going to see. And I think some of the best solutions out there are not even invented yet. So it's so early. We'll see in 2050, we'll talk about, this completely different method that we had no idea anyone would use. And that's going to be the cheapest and best, perhaps.
So your favorite portfolio, that's kind of you leaving it empty for potential future technologies, or do you want to put like some of the existing ones in there?
There's nothing we exclude. No, there's no portfolio that it's just going to include all of it.
Thank you, Robert.
That's for sure. Like we need them all.
I'm curious to hear from you, Alex. And by chance, I just saw you unmuted yourself also. I'll be curious to hear from you from an investor's perspective, and also from, I know you were leading some products team at Google for Gmail and GCal and some of the other products. So you may be wearing like, I don't know, you tell me, you may be wearing a technology hat or not, may be sort of biased or looking more towards technological solutions. But I'd be really curious to hear what's your what's your perspective on that, and what do you want to see from the type of projects that you invest in?
Well, I think I wanted to say, I think the first thing is, I think what Robert just said at the end is absolutely right. It's like this, we have to do all of these things, right? And I think there has been a bit of a tendency of, you know, each of the camps within carbon removal to occasionally become a little absolutist about like, this is the right solution or that is the right solution. And the reality is this is like just the biggest problem, the biggest challenge that we've ever faced as the human race. And so, you know, I think at any point at this stage, I certainly couldn't pick the top 3 things that I would bet on right now. I would much rather take that money and place it, you know, across a whole suite of things. And the reality is what I'd much rather do is probably use that money to try and convince lots more people to put money into all of the things in this space. So for me, I think it's just, you know, the need to invest across the board. I think there's one thing that I do think is something that we need to keep an eye on, and I think it's this kind of duration kind of aspect of things, and making sure that we're really looking at solutions that have long duration for sequestration, because I think a lot of airtime is given to stuff that is relatively easy to do but has relatively short duration and has a lot of kind of concerns around, okay, well, what happens at the end of the life cycle of that kind of, you know, that solution, and are you keeping kind of moving it up, etc. So I'd like to see more attention placed on things that have longer duration. For me personally, like because we have an investment thesis that is focused on scientific solutions, we tend to look more at things like, you know, direct air capture and, you know, some of those more innovative, some of the more innovative end of the spectrum, not because we think that that's where everyone should put their attention, but because I think, you know, as an individual who is, you know, tackling some part of the, you know, this big challenge, it's important for everyone to say like, well, this is the bit that I'm going to focus on, because otherwise it becomes just too difficult to swallow. So that for us kind of, it captures those things, but it's also just because our fund is very much focused on working with scientists on scientific solutions, you know, that tends to be where our attention is. But I think, you know, for me, the 2 big things are duration and all the things. Let's do all the things. You know?
Yeah. It's interesting. I like to sometimes think about, like, if we just succeeded with everything we have right now on the table, I'm not sure we would even make it. You know, we still need more things.
It's not enough. It's not even close to enough. You know, there's a lot more. You know, one of the things that I'm, you know, I often talk to, you know, limited partners who are interested in investing in the fund, and they'll kind of ask about, you know, what's the competitive situation like? You know, obviously there's more money flowing into the space, and my perspective is just like the bottleneck right now is still company creation. We need massive numbers of more companies to be created in this space to properly explore kind of the number of parameters and the parameter space for the solutions. Because, you know, we probably need more than one solution, and we probably need more than one really big solution. So
this is great, and let's see if we can steer the conversation a little bit in that direction, so that we can leave the participants and viewers here with some sort of ideas of what direction to go in for this massive amounts of company creation. I do want to go a little bit into one of the things you were saying here, Alex. One of the things, so you were saying you were looking very much at technological or science-based solutions. You were also saying that something with a longer permanence. And Iftimia, one of the things you were saying is that you're also keeping your mind and keeping your attention on, okay, there's more than the climate crisis. There's also a how's it called now, with all the species crisis, biodiversity crisis as well. And I know that Sergey, what you're working on is primarily a mangrove project and a little bit of the technology behind. So just wanted to invite you, Sergey, to come on and like share what had you focus on blue carbon, on mangroves, and how do you see that fit into the broader picture of technology and permanence that Alex is talking about?
Actually, yeah, thanks for bringing this up. Actually, I mean, we really big believers. I mean, we looked at various solutions, try to also find what's the biggest, impact we could make in a short time frame, and we eventually kind of stumbled upon mangroves, and we get familiar with them when we tokenized the Tricoin. Basically, it was sponsoring the mangrove restoration in Myanmar in 2016 and 2017, and we get familiar with the mangroves as a species, which is quite different from terrestrial trees, and they have really great ability to capture carbon in the wetlands, basically in the soil, not in per se the biomass, and it's 5 times more carbon capture than for terrestrial trees. They grow fast. They able, if you restore the 1 hectare of mangroves, it can capture maybe 1 tree can capture up to a ton of carbon over the lifetime. So this is really amazing kind of sequestration ability, but at the same time, it also have so much more to just sequestration. So it's the onshore areas where normally the villagers, like the poorest, the fishermen live, and it's the Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, basically the global South, the poorest area of the world. And the mangroves there, they act as a shield from the ocean. I've heard the numbers that 500 meters of the mangroves can basically stop tsunami from which is rolling to the shore. And those areas which cut the mangroves, like those villagers which cut them, make a clear cut, they suffer the most from the cyclones and tsunamis in those areas. So it's a shore protector. At the same time, it's a huge biodiversity there. It's hundreds of species of fish, sea life, birds like white elephants in Myanmar, like all this complex biome, which is you can restore as well by just restoring mangroves. And I think those elements which make it kind of special in addition to sequestration. For the permanence perspective, if you basically leave mangroves on the ground, they will sequester more and more carbon over the lifetime. So it's hundreds of years of permanence if you make sure that mangroves basically stay. And unfortunately, it's not the case. The mangroves are being degraded, at the rate of from 0.2 to 1% per year. That's quite a lot. And we lost, I think, 3 or 4 millions of hectares in the last 3 decades. And if we restore those 3 or 4 millions of hectares that we lost, we can sequester up to a gigaton of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere over the 20 years time frame. So I think in terms of kind of quality of solution, it's pretty what was striking for us. And we focus now the efforts on mangrove restoration solely and try to support the early projects which are still struggling with the land use rights, with the technology, how to plant mangroves, the right species composition, and also try to help them with Vera registration and so on. So this, of course, it's not a long solution. It's not super permanent, not maybe 10,000 of years, but that's could be an effective solution in my lifetime, I would say. So, and yeah, there are other things we're looking at, like the biochar and mineralization for carbon sequestration, but there's so much more. They have their own challenges to scale, I would say.
Thank you, Sergey. And I just want to give the panel, we've now had a little bit of a tour on this question here for everybody on this panel. And I just want to give anybody a chance to respond or to react, to say anything about what we've talked about so far before it is that we start to move away forward onto the next question. And unless there's anybody that's waving madly, I'm looking at the 4 of you, dear panelists, nobody's waving madly. Oh, if Timias, he's take me. Okay, let's go.
Yes, I'll be really short. So I agree with what other panelists said, that we need all of the solutions, but I just want to highlight that the technological carbon removal is not existent at the moment on the market, and the little volumes they're priced extremely high. So for example, I have seen from compensate perspective that customers they have a budget, and technological carbon removal greatly exceeds this budget. So there are just the biggest tech companies in the world at the moment. They're happy to pay the price of, let's say, 500 to 1,000 euros per ton of CO2. But we're definitely heading in that direction. So we increase technological removals in the portfolio, but we still have to work with what's available.
Thank you, Timia. And Robert, and I see Frederick also, you raised your hand. Thank you for really participating and leaning in. Robert, I'm just going to go to Frederick first, to the one of our participants here, and then we'll come back and we'll round this question off with you, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think that my question is probably to Sergey. So when we consider the voluntary carbon market currently is about $1 billion, according to this famous McKinsey study, and is expected to grow to 200 billion in order to meet all the net zero commitments from all the companies by 2050, which is obviously way too late. The question I'm having to you is, based on your experience, what needs to happen in order to get more projects off the ground?
Yeah,
And I know it sounds simple, but it's very difficult. So
I think we're short of the high quality supply. I mean, already now, the total, if you look at the total reforestation, which is verified by Vera, that's 30 million tons a year. And that's kind of this and the rest is avoidance, basically. It's technology avoidance, or like REDD+. So like even the reforestation, though it's quite scaled, it's still like small compared to what we need, and we need at least a gigaton by 2030 or maybe more. So we need to help the small projects to get off the ground, and we need to help the existing projects to scale. So there's two things, and I think the low-hanging fruits will be to help the existing teams, which sometimes face the capital constraints. They are not very experienced in like certification sometimes, but they can plant trees, and they know how to plant trees. So, and like this can like be sort of short low-hanging fruits. Speaking about the nature-based solutions, and there is a long tail of much smaller micro teams, or like micro eco-heroes, which don't even have maybe the land use rights, but they also can plant trees. And for them, we need maybe a next generation of MRV, the next generation of standards, which will allow also like to verify their work, but without going to Vera, because basically Vera validation is $50K just the validation, and then you have to pay every year for verification, which is the same size. So you basically have to have 500 hectares or more of the project to justify those verification costs. So for small projects, it's not possible, and we need to support them by the new standards, like open forest protocol or like similar, where you can be sort of much more effective and still precise enough.
Thank you, Sergey. That was a very good answer. So verification, validation verification, we need some real breakthroughs in that and the methodologies as well, and then we need funding for the smaller projects so that we can really see more unfold. And that speaks a bit also to what you were talking about, Alex. Now we're talking a little bit in nature-based, but of course, similarly with technology projects. Robert, let's hear from you.
So I have to reply or comment to Eftimias about the carbon removal being too expensive and not available. I mean, that's right. And we discussed in the past as well, this approach where you don't offset, but you try to support the most effective climate solutions. And I think this is precisely one of the reasons why offsetting is a very limiting practice, because you are limiting yourself to buy cheap stuff, so you can actually buy as many thousands of credits as you have emissions. So then you have to buy the sort of perhaps lower quality or at least lower permanence options. And you cannot buy things that happen in the future either, because then you can't call yourself carbon neutral. So it's much better just to go out and see how can I actually best support climate solutions. And then that could entail buying carbon removal at like $2,000 per ton, as we did with Milky Way Climate Transformation Fund as well, for the most expensive one. But it's really a form of R&D support to get new solutions onto the market later on. So that kind of early catalytic funding, it can be really important. And of course, Stripe and Shopify has been blazing the way there. But there's a need for more companies also to use their money in sort of more agnostic way, on the offset agnostic way, and just try to stimulate the best solutions in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, Robert. Thank you. And that's actually a really good segue into the next question. It's really like supporting these emerging technologies that we know we need that isn't there yet. So I just pulled together a couple of numbers here, and then I have a question for the panel. So I'll just share, first of all, from some of these numbers here. So the capital that's committed to net zero from the Glasgow Financial Alliance and that's from all the financial institutions, it's now 130 million, a trillion, sorry. And what does that even mean? Okay, we can have a conversation about that, but I don't think that's super helpful. But okay, somehow they are committed to this. We saw the advanced market commitment from Frontier that you were talking about, Robert, with Stripe, Shopify, Meta, Alphabet, and McKinsey, 925 million to carbon removal in particular, with their own sort of definitions of the type of solutions they want to see. We also saw but we've seen like emerging funds and investments and grants. Amazon, they created a $2 billion corporate venture fund to help them realize their carbon net zero goals. Microsoft, a $1 billion fund. The $350 million VC fund from lower carbon capital, plus many more, and Alex, Zero Carbon Capital, of course, falls into that category as well. We saw Climeworks raising like the biggest round in the industry with 600 million. Amazon has a $200 million reforestation fund in particular, and also the X Prize from Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is also getting involved here. My question here is, based on what Robert is saying and based on this movement we're seeing in the market, and this is a question for you, Alex, like what will this work, and how will we see this unfold? You started talking about it a little bit with the sort of the massive amounts of company creation you were saying, Alex. I'd be curious to hear you unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I guess first, it's great that there is more money kind of flowing into this space. I would say, generally speaking, there's a lot more money in press releases than there is in the market, which is always a little disappointing. And I think a lot of that money is I think a team that are doing a great job of this are the Stripe and Frontier folks who are actually, they're really delivering on what they're talking about. But then there's a lot of other folks who have very large funds who are committed to this, but I'm not sure are necessarily committed to investing early enough and in things that are risky enough that are actually going to kind of solve the problem. Because I think ultimately here what we need is a lot of kind of big swings, because we're going to need some very big wins to solve this problem. We're not going to be able to, as much as we should, we're adding up all of the small kind of projects that we have is not going to get us to where we need to be. Right. And at the same time, betting all of our money on Climeworks is also not a very good solution. Right. So ultimately, I think what we need to do is we need to have like a lot of Climeworks size bets in this market. And right now we're kind of in this kind of early stage where we have a very small number that are kind of percolating up there. And I'd like to see kind of more support for those early stage projects to kind of come up with these kind of alternative solutions that that then gives us kind of more swings at solving this problem. Because as I think the reality is we need several very large scale solutions to this, and at the moment we don't have enough bets on the table, I think, for us to kind of get there. And yeah, there's a lot of money committed, but that money needs to be put to work very quickly. And I think it's sometimes there's still a little bit of conservatism going on in some of that, and some of that money is flowing into kind of lower risk, shorter term solutions, which again make great press releases and enable you to make statements about whether or not you're carbon neutral this year or next year or the year after, but don't necessarily solve the problem for us in 2050, which is what we all need to be focused on, right? And so getting that balance right, there is going to be really hard.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question for you. I see you also unmuting yourself. By the way, Robert, Sergey, Eftimia, and Alex, if you have something you want to respond to, you can actually just use the hands up feature here in Zoom. Then I know that I can just call on you. But I did want to just ask you as a follow-up, Alex. I don't know if you said you closed the first close for this fund here in April, and you had another fund before that. I'm curious if Climeworks deck ever came across your desk, and from your scientific perspective, from the thesis of your fund and your experience as a GP, what do you see? Like, what made the difference for a company like Climeworks to really go out and raise such a big round?
So it didn't. They're already a bit too late for us. We're kind of we would participate much earlier in their progress than that. I mean, I think there's kind of two things to bear in mind here. I think there's one, just on a scientific basis, when I look at a carbon removal technology, especially when I look at a scientific carbon removal technology, the first thing that I do, I'm a physicist, from university days, so first thing I do is just try and understand the chemistry and the thermodynamics of the process, right? Is there ever any situation where the energy requirement for this process looks like we might be able to do it at, a price that is not going to bankrupt the world? And so, that's kind of how were Climeworks to come across my desk, that's what I would be looking at for Climeworks solution, just as I am, we're currently working with a whole bunch of companies in this space and evaluating them, and that's kind of where we tend to come at it from. In terms of what enabled them to bubble up, I mean, VC is a funny game, right? And this is, you can't, it's very hard to ever really answer that. You can go and talk to founders about how they will be able to look back and tell you all of the things that they did perfectly correctly in order to make these things work. And the reality is sometimes what happens is just, something gets into the air and into the water, and VCs are like, yes, this is the solution. And I think, they were fortunate to be in a situation where there was a lot of money looking to go into that space, and there weren't a lot of companies that had an interesting solution. And again, this is my point around needing more company creation. There's all that money that you just kind of talked about wanting to go into this space. It would be a crying shame if all of that went into a very small number of bets. Because ultimately I don't think we have the luxury of being able to try and pick winners at this stage.
Thank you. Robert, or did you still, yeah.
No, yeah, I think sort of the point on whether we need more solutions funded is I think really important. That now there's a few that's getting a lot of money and a lot of attention, and some people asked, there was someone wanting nominations for like an award, and I mentioned some direct air capture companies, and he said, like, why not just Climeworks? Aren't they the best ones? Like, I mean, they're getting all the funding. So that's what people who are outside the sector might have heard of, and everyone thinks that they're the natural winners, perhaps. I mean, they might be, like, they're the ones that actually built the facility, but there's so many different solutions available, and as we said before, the ones that might end up being the best ones are probably not even made up yet, perhaps. But we'll know a lot more once we have pilot facilities, where we have facilities that remove maybe 1,000 tons per year. Most of these, for example, direct air capture and ocean electrochemistry capture methods, they are removing like grams in labs. So the sort of challenges that emerge when you're trying your solutions on like hundreds of tons or thousands of tons per year will give us a lot better knowledge about what technologies are actually working. So just getting past that stage, we're not talking about massive scale up, because massive scale up is another challenge, and we'll see different things then. But just getting past the stage where we actually try the solutions like for real outside the lab and see what happens, and we'll be able to give a much better assessment about which solutions are the most promising ones, which are the ones that we think will fall most in price, which can be fitted together with the overall net zero transition. For example, those that can be run on intermittent energy have a huge advantage, and that entails low capital cost, for example. So that's not the only thing. So those with higher capital costs might have other advantages, but I think we'll have a lot better sort of view of the field and which companies to actually go in and put like huge amounts of money into. But these kind of smaller amounts of money, a few millions, are also helping companies actually go out and test their solutions.
Yeah, we need more bets, more tests faster, and more of these lab tests scaling. And Robert, make sure if you come across some of these lab tests here and you find some exciting ones, to pop them over Alex's way. I'm sure he'd love to have a look at them, and maybe also Bob here in the audience. So Sergey, you're an entrepreneur. You've been founding several different companies. One of the things that we're kind of like teasing out is well, we need a lot more companies to create it. We need more different experiments, because we know that we don't know the solution yet. So how do we find the solution? Well, we got to experiment with as many solutions as possible. How do we do that? And what's up with this kind of, because maybe we're back to like typical sort of humanity question, or the question of like everybody just follows the big guys, like we saw with Climeworks, and then everybody just puts money into one thing, or kind of we stare ourselves blind and FOMO around that. Like, what do you think, Sergey, is missing in the startup community, so that we, I don't know, maybe we'll have to sort of shift away from this kind of winner mentality, and like, how can we make a lot of small winners rather than one massive one? Or feel free to take this question in a little bit of a different direction if you don't see that as a fitting question.
Well, I mean, from what I see, I don't see the scarcity of companies. If you look at how many participants were actually for the X Prize recently, it was 1,000 something, right? So it's already quite a substantial number of new cohorts, which emerge. Like another example, we're now on the board of the Clim Accelerator in ETH Zurich. They have like 20 companies, which are like 1-2 people, startups, super early stage with some technology, with some early experiments. We see those kind of, when there is a strong signal from the market, such as advanced market commitment from Frontier, that creates also this supply of some ex-physicists or chemists, like they try to come up with novel solutions. We also, I see it like we just need to find a way to, but this is again the venture, I think, where Alex, maybe the role of the venture capitalist is the best, to identify them and bring them to top of the stage on the cycle. From the nature-based solution, what we see is the lack of risk capital still. So people talk about, yes, nature-based reforestation is pretty much can be expanded, but then companies just want sometimes verified carbon. So when you talk to companies, they say, yeah, we just will buy maybe 100,000 tons from you now if you have it verified. But when you tell, yes, it's a new product, it's a greenfield, it will be in development, and we have 20 years of curve, they say, yeah, maybe just we'll wait until this carbon and then we buy it from you. So there's still the lack of this risk capital, which will be appropriate for this early stage financing. And I think we have to bridge this gap with both the kind of institutional commitments, maybe some kind of a liquidity from token market where we can actually mobilize some risk liquidity, which will be some kind of a crowdfunding those early stage projects. So we have to figure out the risk capital at scale to make them grow.
What do you think, Timia? You've been working with different kind of carbon removal projects, and I know that you've also been, I think you've yourself been involved a bit with some of the clients that you've been dealing with. Perhaps some of those clients were investors, perhaps some of them were venture-like investors or not. And I'm curious, how do you see the development of risk capital into nature-based solutions?
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to say that from my experience, I can confirm what just Sergey said about future credits and companies. There is a demand for spot credits, but I already see a shift towards future credits because there is just not enough supply to meet the demands. And I noticed that if you try to find a new good project, for example, nature-based reforestation, the credits are already committed before they reach the registry of Vera. So unless you have forward agreements with the project developer well in advance, you cannot get any of these credits when they're issued in the future. At least for the smaller projects, that's valid. And many of our customers are what also Sergey said, that they're just looking for spot credits, but some of the bigger ones, they're also ready to commit. And we have participated in RFPs in the last 1 year, and we have, in a way, said this is the amount you get in the next 20 years. And companies had the opportunity, for example, to consider this longer carbon curve as well. I think that will be extremely important in order to get the capital to start new projects. So we need certainty in the market. We need to know that the supply is following the demand. We need commitments from companies today and upfront purchases and so on.
This is all music to my ears. Sorry to jump in here. This is exactly what Green Trade is doing. I would love to hire you immediately here. So thank you so much. We do forward financing, exactly that. Yeah.
We can definitely have a
okay. Great. Thank you, Frederick. We're having the job offers being handed out here and everything. Really great. So we started with you, Alex. I'm curious to come back to you here and hear from you, react to some of the things that's been saying here. And also perhaps a little prompt, well, something that I'm kind of left with here is, how do you as a venture capitalist, as a GP of a fund that is looking at technology-based solutions, how do you, for carbon removal, how do you think of the asset of carbon credits and how that will hit the market, and how that will, how the demand of that we know will have to be astronomically higher than it is today in comparison if we want to reach our climate goals? Like, how do you kind of think the commodity of carbon credits and the asset class into your perspective as you're investing in technological solutions?
I'm probably a little unusual for VCs in this space in that I try my hardest not to think about that at all. On the basis that I try, really our kind of thesis is ultimately that, you know, if you're able to capture and sequester significant amounts of carbon, then we as a society, we as a world will figure out ways to remunerate you for it. Ultimately, like the costs of the carbon existing in the atmosphere are so high and so well understood that, you know, to me, ultimately, I think that is something I think about carbon credits as, in the long run, there will be a market for the carbon that the companies that we're investing in remove. And that's the extent that I think about it. I think ultimately, I have the kind of the privilege to be able to do that because I'm not investing in companies that I expect to be generating revenues in the next 5 years, right? So ultimately, you know, my expectation is that they'll be generating revenues. You know, if they are generating revenues in, you know, the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be in the second half of that period of time. And so to some extent, I think I try and just kind of stay focused on that idea of, you know, how can we bring the costs associated with this down as low as possible, so that when the market meets, it meets at something that is kind of affordable and sensible. That's not to say, you know, and again, I kind of come back to that point of like, you know, we actually need to do all of these things. They're not, I don't do that because I don't think that we should be trading credits today. I do that because that's the part of the problem that I've chosen to focus on, which means that I don't have to focus on trading credits today. Do I think people should be doing that and we should be doing that? Yes, absolutely, because it has a catalytic effect on some of the other technologies that aren't necessarily in my focus area.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks a lot. And I think, yeah, that's a good way to think about it also. Like, really, I'm hearing you're looking at what it is that you have on your table as your expertise, and you're focusing on a very particular part of the problem, and you're trusting that we as a global community are going to work the rest out, and you're going to put your skills and knowledge at work at where you see you can make the biggest difference.
Yeah, and I think, obviously as our portfolio matures, my role in supporting them will change. So, if you were to ask me that question in 5 years' time, I'm sure I'd have a very different answer. But right now, when I think about the things that keep me awake at night about the success of the companies that we're investing in across the board, but also, as we look at carbon dioxide removal, like figuring out how to get remuneration for the carbon dioxide removal, or the avoidance of the emissions is not something that sits very high on the list. Not because it won't be a problem, but because it is a much less immediate existential threat to the companies that I'm investing in than all of the other risks that they face.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I'm planning on moving on here to the next question. Just looking at your panelists, if there is anybody that feel like there is something left out, then wave at me and I'll. Okay, I see nobody waving. So let's move on. The last question that I have prepared, and then afterwards, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do audience questions. I have noted down some of the audience questions that was submitted before the actual panel. So I'll be choosing from them, unless there is anybody here in the audience right now who has some questions, and I'd like to prefer to answer those. And my last question for the panel is, what is the biggest opportunities in the market? And I think it seems like we can, there may be already sort of a shift here. Like we could perhaps think about opportunities in the market itself, in the market creation of carbon credits. And then there is also the other area that I'm seeing emerging here in this conversation, which is more like, what's the biggest technology opportunities that we see? And I'm not entirely sure where to start with the panelists. I wrote down Robert here, but if there's anybody else who wants to start answering this question with where the biggest opportunities are, then, okay, Robert, I see he's preparing himself.
Always ready. No, I mean, that's a very difficult question to answer, because like, where are you talking from? Like opportunities globally for everyone, or as someone who wants to get into the field, or as an investor? But I mean, talking about it more generally for the world against climate, against the climate crisis, the opportunities in carbon removal. I think there's a lot of pathways that we haven't gone deep down enough on and explored, but there are startups now starting to do that. So, I mean, enhanced weathering, rock farming. So that's, as David Beerling talked about, farming with rocks is one thing that's a lot of research going in now, for example. We're getting the results, we're seeing how feasible that idea is. Electrochemical ocean captures is being tried out in the same way, with mass burial, and then all the new direct air capture technologies like electrochemical DAC and like mineral relooping DAC. Like, there's lots of opportunities and solutions that look very, very promising. But as I talked about in my last answer, we really need to try them and see how it works in practice, and see what kind of challenges shows up, and what kind of things that we didn't think about. But there are, like, maybe 20 different pathways, I would say, or something like that, that are all looking promising, and probably could reach like gigatons on their own. Very few solutions will be able to reach several gigatons, or like 5, 10. But if you have a portfolio of solutions, we can definitely come up in those kind of 10 gigatons numbers if they all contribute to it. But yeah, I guess if you answer it from another perspective, like what are the opportunities for me as an individual to come in, I think that's huge, because now it's so early still. Like I came in carbon removal just like a little bit more than 2.5 years ago or so, and then it was even more earlier, and it's happened a lot since then. But the industry is still really, really in its infancy. So anyone who comes in and starts working in this field now can have an outsized impact, and can form the field and can contribute a lot, do a lot of thinking, start new companies, or help the ones that are just getting started. So that's also a huge opportunity.
Great, and Robert, so I just want to, as let's say as a part of the audience now, some of the questions we got in was like, how do I get involved? What kind of skills is needed? Of course, if you're a scientist and you already have like a little technology that you've been researching and inventing, then it's pretty obvious how you would get involved. But if you're not, what's like, how do you see, what would your recommendations be for like an aspiring entrepreneur or founder in another industry to step into climate?
Well, for carbon removal specifically, which is one I'm nerding on, I think like a community like Air Miners, which have a Slack group and sort of a vivid community posting videos, etc., and events, and also Open Air Collective are places where you can meet others working on carbon removal, meet other startup founders, see sort of where could I fit in here. And there's definitely a need for different types of people to get involved. I don't have a technological background. My background is in policy and communication. So startups need people who work with that, with comms, with marketing, with doing software development, and maybe with policy as well. But then, of course, there is a great need for like mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, like people who actually can build the machines and sort of operate them as well. So if you're in those kind of adjacent fields, I definitely think you should go into carbon removal.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a shift away from software eats the world to shit, we got to build some hardware here to suck carbon out of the air.
Yeah, it's all hard tech.
Yeah. All right. How about you, Sergey or Alex or Eftimia? Who want to go next? What's the biggest opportunities we see for the audience that they can dive into? Sergey.
Actually, on the downstream, like on the market and like the I would say the transparency and the verification methodologies, there is still a lot of things to do. So I see the opportunities there as well. I think our standards that we exist, especially for like voluntary carbon market, they are like not really effective in terms of like the time and the responsiveness and the quality of what they do. I think there's a lot of improvement in this area still possible. Like create better standards, better registries, blockchain native, with just so many benefits you can get from this, decreasing the costs of the basically market and verification of existing, and also I know also for the technical removals, it's also MRV is kind of the area to be improved. So it's yet to become like a better registries and more effective ways to like translate carbon. And markets obviously also, like currently if you want to buy some carbon, you don't know where to go. Basically, it's not a possibility. If you want to, let's say, even put your speculative capital to work, it's not really easy to do so. So I think that's where the blockchain and tokenization can bring its own benefits.
There was like, in the market making, in the enabling anybody to participate in the speculation and putting their own capital to work for the better of the climate. Yeah, great. Thank you, Sergey. How about you, Alex or Timia? Where do you see? Where would you love to see more people go to work? Where is the biggest opportunities here?
I can maybe start. So at the moment, removals are just 5% of the market, of the traded volume. So we definitely need to scale this to much higher number. And I see some successful models which are already working. For example, community-led projects where local farmers are reforesting and restoring degraded lands that can be scaled. So taking this experience and just multiplying it on a larger scale. This is exactly what we need. And also on the technological side, there were mentions of pilot facilities and direct air capture. It is true that it is just evolving now. And at the moment, it is quite energy intensive, but I have already met companies which are working on that, reducing the energy demand for direct air capture facilities. And there is innovation happening all the time. So I'm really optimistic about the next generation of this technology.
All right. Yeah. So direct air capture, that's something that you're excited about. Yeah. And the reduction of energy. And I guess that unlocks lots of other technologies as well. Alex, how about you?
Well, given I'll continue to bang my drum for not enough company formation, I think you should start a company. So, I think, first of all, we need to think about, these are going to be scientific scientists. So if you're a scientist yourself, then, that's great. If you're not a scientist, then go find a way to get exposed to, scientists in the area. But ultimately, I think there's a great opportunity if you can identify a way to sequester large amounts of carbon for a very long time at very low cost. That's what your goal should be. And then, if you can start a company with that objective, then, I think there's huge opportunities associated with that.
Yeah, just great. It's really great what you're saying, Alex. And I think it seems to me like kind of a pattern that's emerging here. But if we look at ourselves as a species, as human beings, we're successful because of our ability to collaborate. There is just not a chance we could have gotten where we are today with the kind of technology we have available without collaboration. And it's just right there in front of us. It's that we need to start more companies, and we want, if you're a scientist, great, go and do your science. If you're not a scientist, find a scientist, collaborate, and then you'll make one solution. That's a part of the portfolio solutions that we need. So really, like, this is an incredible opportunity for us to step up as a species and really like elevate the collaboration that we are capable of as a species. I think that's incredible, exciting.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to just say in terms of like an area, because I haven't talked about it very much, but I think Eftimia mentioned it earlier, like right at the start of the conversation was kind of ocean-based solutions. I think there's a ton of like, there's a ton of kind of white space there that is not being explored sufficiently yet. So, I think if you're kind of looking at an area where, you think there might be some opportunities, I think that is an area that is currently kind of underinvested. And I've seen some interesting things there, but, the oceans are like a huge carbon sink, a huge natural carbon sink, and have some characteristics that make them could make them really good for future sequestration. And actually turns out like a lot of the things that I've seen in that space are also very positive for kind of like ocean health and biodiversity at the same time. So if there was kind of an area that I would want more people to spend a bit more time looking at, that's kind of one of them. It's not necessarily an area that I would invest in because a lot of the solutions are not like pure science based. But there are lots of investors that would, and I'd like to see more solutions in that space.
Yeah, really great. Thank you. That was very precise, Alex. Thanks for that. Like, yeah, so ocean-based solutions. That's a clear space that the audience here can walk away and have a look at and see where they can make a difference there. So we're nearing the end of the questions that I prepared for the panel. And I didn't mention this, but I do actually want to give the panelists an opportunity to also ask each other some questions if they want. And we're also going to take audience questions now. So if you're in the audience and you have some questions about how you can get involved or anything that's being said today, then feel free to raise your hand. I see Frederick, you raised your hand already. I'll just give a moment also for any other participants to get themselves involved. Find that little yellow button where they can raise their hand. For anybody who doesn't know where it is, it's hidden in the reactions button down in the panel below, where you just hit that little reaction and you find raise your hand, and you can also raise your hand. Frederick, I'm going to come to you in a minute. I just want to check here with the panelists if you have any questions that you would like to hear from one another, from the policy side that Robert represents, from the market side that Eftimia represents, from the investor and technology side that you represent, Alex, and Sergey from also the market making and blue carbon nature-based solutions side. And of course, like, this is very sort of boxed. Of course, I know it's not like that. But if you have any questions for each other, please shoot. Okay, we got another hand up here from Robert. Sorry, from Robin. And unless you have anything for each other, then I'll just give the word over to Robin here. Robin, go ahead. What's your question? And maybe just introduce yourself as well.
Yes, I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah, can you come a little closer to the microphone? We hear you, but not too well.
Yeah, I'm at the conference right now. I tried to speak a bit louder. Does it work like
Perfect.
that?
This works.
Yes. So my question is related to the conference. I am at the European Climate Summit right now. And I get the feeling that there are a lot of traders, brokers, also project developers, and a small amount of companies talking about kind of how to arrange which price to pay for a carbon credit. And I would be interested in the panelists how I know there is some sense to have an intermediary, but I would be more interested in how could a systematic solution be built that the project developer who actually gets the CO2 out of the atmosphere is directly connected with a company emitting CO2. Because I have the feeling that right now in this not very clear market, a lot of value is captured of intermediaries that do not add too much value. So I'd be interested in the opinion of the panelists here.
Robert, do you wanna go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think like reselling carbon credits and trying to make a profit out of it is not helping anyone, I think. And it says different types of carbon solutions are not fungible anyway right now. It's very, very different what you're supporting. So you need some kind of intermediaries for the non-super advanced companies. If you don't have like a few hundred hours to spare, then you need an intermediary. And those intermediaries could be like compensate that don't even take a cut and only have like a flat fee, or it could be in other ways where they don't like make a 80-90% profit, but rather just sort of work as someone that can help companies match with good solutions. But I don't think the role where you speculate on carbon is good, and we shouldn't have those actors.
Maybe I can go next. So slightly different perspective, because I've been in this market for the past 2.5 years, and I have never had any problems buying straight from the project developer. And that changed around November last year. So just after COP, the market changed significantly. And I noticed a trend where project developers, they're willingly selling all of their credits to these traders because they can get the money immediately and they can start new projects and expand and so on. So they're quite happy selling their credits to the brokers. And the result for me is that I don't have a choice but to work with brokers when I cannot reach credits from the project developer. So that's also another perspective. But of course, in the ideal situation, I would work directly with project developers. But when this is not possible, traders are also a possibility. And usually they're quite transparent, at least the ones we partner with. And one of our trusted suppliers doesn't even take any cut when they resell to startups. And other traders take just a couple of percentage on every trade. So it's quite good.
Thank you, Timia. Sergey.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly see there's a technology upside here if we look at those new marketplaces which emerged, like Pure or like Carbon Future for biochar. Like Vlinder also like builds this transparent infrastructure where you can basically get the same price as a seller and as a buyer, like when you basically auction your carbon. And it's a direct participation from the projects or like any intermediaries. I think the problem here is not that the large margin is taken for the reselling. Sometimes the brokers are the investors of the projects and take the risk. And this is basically a risk premium. And maybe out of the 10 projects, I mean, 5 will fail. And actually, it's like a bit of like a VC thing. So they will take the risk test, which they need to cover from this margin. So it's not that simple. And we like this risk still, this risk capital on the market. Maybe ideally, we should have a platform where we can bridge together the interests of the corporate buyers long term, because they ultimately are the ones who contribute to this, and the project developers, and they kind of match and receive the risk capital to start new projects. So this is where I think there's potential.
Thank you. And I see, Frederick, you unmuted yourself, and I know you've been having your hand up for a while.
No,
so
it's fine. I just want to share a thought on this, because this is a Xoogler community here as well. it reminds me a little bit of the beginning of EdTech. Think about it, how it was when, let's say, the project developer owns inventory, is a publisher, right? And then all the people, all the aggregators bought the publisher inventory and sold it with a premium to the advertiser. And then real-time bidding came into play. And it feels a little bit that maybe this market is going to shift in a similar way, you know, and I'm just curious whether auctioning is going to become, you know, for the pricing mechanism, somewhat a mainstream, maybe in 1 or 2 years, yeah, where you have clarity in terms of what is a good carbon credit, what's a bad carbon credit, what's, you know, how can you compensate with what and what not. I'm just sharing this thought because I see there is maybe some similarities from the advertising industry, how it was 10, 15 years ago. But my question is different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thought that you're sharing here, and it certainly looks like a market making in any type of market, may that be ad tech or other types of markets. And I think, like, interestingly, what Sergey points out is that there's what's there is that there's kind of a, with ad tech, you purchase an impression that happens in the second that you purchase it almost. But with carbon credits, there's oftentimes like a long period of time from when you want to buy it until you actually get the carbon credit or the carbon sequestered from the atmosphere. I'm curious to hear how we're going to bridge this gap. Maybe this is what your question is about, Frederick. I don't know, because I know you're working on this. What's your question?
No, my question is slightly different. It goes back to the announcement from today from Vera. And in general, I believe this is fantastic because all the crap that's been, you know, already has no meaning anymore, also doesn't do any good, and just put on on chain. Something that's retired and people make money out of that, that doesn't do any good to the nature. So I think it's good that they're trying to prohibit this. Question is how enforceable that is. This is the number one question. And I believe this is to Ifti Maya's point, this is great for future trading, right? Because we can focus on really high quality projects and high quality credits, right? And then hopefully get endorsement from Vera. Yeah. And I just wanted to get your thoughts, or the panel's thoughts, on this announcement from today and the enforceability, which I'm skeptical about, but yeah, how you all see that.
Thank you. Sergey, do you want to take that one? You have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I first want to comment. I mean, I see there's a bit of a misunderstanding about the quality of the tokenized credits that are different from the credits in the registry. Basically, they're the same. Kind of the origination is in the carbon registry. So if Vera allows the poor quality credits, that's Vera's problem, not the tokenization problem. And secondly, the tokenization which was done, I think I guess the Vera refers to one-way bridges which are done by Toucan and later also C3, like there's a couple of other bridges, but Toucan, one of the most famous one, because they enabled tokenization of 20 million tons of carbon. From the perspective of the retirement and claimability, I'm a believer that it's a fairly transparent scheme. You don't retire the credit, and maybe basically you retire it on the registry, but you don't claim this credit for the environmental benefit. And the NFT, which is credit, the one which is referenced in the retirement statement on Vera, is basically the claimable asset. If you burn it and you prove you burned it, you are actually the beneficiary of this environmental, claim. So for me, it's a transparent scheme. It doesn't add anything, doesn't improve the quality, doesn't deprove the quality of the credits, but it creates this better registry. For if you look at the public blockchains, they are much more transparent in terms of you can transfer it, you can actually divide it by several owners. You can trade it much more easily than on the traditional markets, with much less friction of access and service fee. So it's just a better registry than the old Web 0.1, 1.0 versions of registries that are there. So for me, the Vera's position is more like a protective one for their own market power. They have still they control basically the perimeter of the tradability and transferability of their carbon. Now with this one-way bridges like Toucan, they don't anymore control those. And I think they want to get this control, and they of course push the quality and those energy inefficiency of blockchains, all other arguments, but I don't think it's kind of the way that can stop the progress in this area. So, and obviously they will endorse probably the two-way bridges where they have control over the credits, and there is still blockchain representation of the credits on chain. But there is a company which basically is the issuer of those representations, and this company should be compliant, enforceable. It's a bit like a Web 2 thing, and for Web 3 we actually need one-way bridges like Token build. That's my opinion.
Great, and maybe what we could do is we could expand that a little bit, because we got Kate here in the audience. Hello, Kate. Welcome. And you submitted a question before, or as you marked your attendance. And I don't know if you remember it, or if you want to say it yourself, or if you want me to read it up. I noted it here because I think it's an interesting question that we can ask the panelists.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a great segue. I think primarily I'm interested in understanding from you guys a little bit more about how you see blockchain helping to support. So Sergey, you mentioned a great use case there. And yeah, I'm interested in hearing more about any projects you may have been involved with to date, and any projects that you would like to see kicked off using blockchain technology.
Okay, maybe just a little bit continue to like the great question. I think the blockchains have a say in this new market. At least there is two types of solutions they can bring. The first is just create a better registries, and we have seen the token, one-way bridge. You, for the same asset, you create a better representation, and let's say more fractionalized, more liquid, with maybe with new demand coming on this market. But that's just intermediate step for me. I think the ultimate goal is to have the blockchain native registries coming, just built together with methodologies and standards and improved monitoring, reporting, verification. So we see region network evolving, open forest protocol and the that built natively on blockchains with just new kind of next generation methodologies as well, using the advancement in the remote sensing, in the improved ways of verification, the impact, the carbon sequestration. That's for me, this is the next generation of those protocols.
Thank you, Sergey. I see your hand, Eftimia. Maria, I noted down your question, and that's the one I wanted to ask the panelists next. I'll just give you a chance to react or say your question if you want to yourself. But I just want to hand the word over to Eftimia. She stuck her hand up in the air, and let her also speak to this question.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the blockchain. So first, we see that these low quality credits, for example, are put there. And in a way, I agree to some extent that improves transparency and so on, but we should not forget that it doesn't improve the quality. So putting a bad project on the blockchain will not, no matter how better monitoring and verification it has, if the baseline is bad, if the project overestimates its impact, it will not become better. And also blockchain has a lot of emissions, so we should also not forget that when we think about the big picture. And I think more effort should be focused on how to improve methodologies, because most of the projects on the market, for example, Red Plus, they're notorious for having overinflated baselines, how they're issuing fake credits. So I think more efforts into improving the existing problems.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you, Eftimia. And we may, I don't know, let's see where the next 30 minutes go. There's 30 more minutes left here of this panel. Maybe we'll have more blockchain, but I definitely I want to create space also for other other conversation besides just blockchain. I know we could probably continue this panel only talking about that, I'm sure, with the passion and energy into the industry there. But Maria, I wanted to, I have your question here. Do you want to say it yourself, or?
Yeah, no, actually, I don't remember, I don't recall what question I asked, but can I ask another question right now?
Sure, absolutely.
I don't know if it's relevant, but it's about decarbonization in general and socioeconomic impacts on communities. Because there was a great article in The Economist a couple of months ago where, for example, a lot of companies trying to offset the carbon impact, and the buying lands up in Scotland, and local communities are suffering as a result of us. So it creates distress and the prices go up. And is there a plan to change it somehow?
So the question is, what is the impact of the nature? Is it nature-based solutions in particular you imagine? Or?
Yes. So how to alleviate the impact of this decarbonization in impoverished areas? All
right. Okay. Yeah. So projects on the ground has an impact on the local communities wherever it is all around the world. What can we do to alleviate that impact and perhaps even like flip it around and have value?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for rephrasing it.
All right. Got it. Thank you, Maria. What do you think, dear panel, who want to speak to this?
I mean, I can just give I don't have that answer. I don't necessarily think that there is an answer to this. I mean, I think, whenever we're looking at any project today, we should be thinking about kind of the full set of stakeholder impacts, and what the impacts of those, what the positive impacts are, what the negative impacts are, and trying to understand those, mitigate the negative impacts, but also kind of balance the benefits and the costs associated with doing something. So I think we need to move fast on this stuff, but moving fast doesn't give us the right to ignore the impact on people around us of any solution. And in fact, that's really what kind of got us into this problem in the first place, right? Is not thinking about the externalities of some of the easy solutions that were in front of us. And so, I think it's really important that people pay attention to it. I think, ultimately, history tells us that if you want companies to pay attention to those externalities, you're probably going to end up having some sort of regulation to make that happen. But, I think good companies kind of pay attention to it from the outset. There will always be examples, I think, of bad actors. There will also be examples of situations where, people are negatively impacted, but it makes sense for us as a society to do that. I think I always think of the example of, wealthy homeowners in Surrey not wanting to have a wind farm near their house. It's just like, I'm really sorry, but I know it's going to make you like a tiny little bit less happy, but it's going to make everyone else much happier. So, there are situations where you want to make that trade-off. I think you want to try and avoid making that trade-off in situations where the person being impacted doesn't have a great deal of power. And that's where the protections need to come in place. And either you need, companies that act well by default, or you need regulation that causes them to act well.
Eftimia.
Thanks. So the question was about nature-based solutions. I'll just take this angle because I have also seen so many nature-based projects, and most of them are in the global south. So exactly poor communities who are on the project area or just adjacent to it. So it is extremely important that the project mitigates the socioeconomic impacts. For example, if you have a large-scale plantation that can raise food prices, it will raise the price to buy land, it will make people even poorer than they were before. And this is exactly what we should not support. So projects, they should, in a way, make people participate in the project, give cash payments, give other benefits. So people will feel, because all of the deforestation is caused because people turn to forests as their only source of income. So if they have a better choice, if the project creates alternative livelihoods, people will not have to go and cut the nearby forest. And same applies with reforestation projects, because when you plant a tree, you really have to nurture it and take care of it, because there are many examples how large-scale reforestation, you just plant it and then you forget about it and then it dies the next year. So making people committed to the project is extremely important. They need to support it because they're the guardians of this forest. And when the project ends in 20 or 30 years, they need to still take care of the forest and not just cut them after the project end date.
Yeah, thank you, Eftimia. I think it's a great perspective, and like really thinking it full circle in like how can we all win with whatever it is that we're doing. And I hear that's the same that you're saying also, Alex, really. And oh, okay, cool. Like I may take a little hit on myself with having a little wind farm in the background, but wow, this could really be something where we all could win. Could I live with this? How could I make this work? And like really start a conversation and collaborate. Yeah. Maria, do you want to react to that, or is otherwise okay.
That answers my question. Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Maria. Anthony and Gabriela, I see you joined early, you're here still, really great to have you. Is there any questions that you have that you want to ask the panelists? Otherwise, what I'll do is I'm going to turn to some of the audience questions that was submitted before we started. All right. Okay, I don't see any reaction from you over there, so I will ask one of the questions here on the list, which is, in fact, this is a question from you, Gabriela. One of the questions you asked here that you submitted ahead of the panel was, what problems are VCs looking to invest in, and do they align with IPCC recommendations and the path forward? I think this could be a good question for you to talk to, Alex. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer to the general question is that I think there are VCs that are interested in investing across this entire space. Generally speaking, most VCs will have a section of it. Section of it that they are more kind of connected to, or more likely to invest in. But there is money going into everything from measurement and verification to really cutting edge direct air capture, to folks that are looking at biochar type solutions, sequestration. So ultimately I think that the challenge as an entrepreneur will be to find the VC that is interested in your particular space or your particular part of the space. And I think that's actually really important as well. I think the other thing I would say is there's also a lot of kind of just money flowing into this space. And some of that money I think is less valuable than others. So if you can find a VC that really understands the space that you're operating in and can support you in doing that, they are all out there. Then that's much better than necessarily just kind of taking maybe easier to find but less valuable money from a VC that's interested in this space but doesn't necessarily have the kind of the deep experience. So that would be my take. Is I don't think that there is a part of this world that I feel like there isn't a matching VC for right now.
Thank you, Alex. Sergey, I saw you were unmuting yourself. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Actually, just maybe a small point that it's not necessarily a VC funding that you should pursue as it's like a small startup. There are plenty of grants program, and you can like start with smaller and go into big grants. EU is very active in this space, and also like if you're a CDR producer, you could maybe try to apply for this frontier, or similar market commitments where you can actually get the long-term offtake agreements, and then get maybe a loan from the bank, which will kind of finance this offtake agreement. So there's plenty of ways, also without dilution, you can jumpstart.
Yeah, by the way, I totally agree with that, and I'm a huge fan of companies being able to take kind of non-dilutive capital to kind of move forward here. I don't think it diminishes the opportunity for venture capitalists. I think it makes it stronger, actually, because companies are able to remove risk from the table without using risk capital. So it's all good.
What are the prospects for sustainable consumption in the current economic downturn? And this was the question that you actually submitted, Maria. I think it was a good question, and I'd be curious to hear what the panelists think of this. Robert, shall we start over with you, with your background in policy? And
yeah, I've been working a bit on that topic as well, on sustainable consumption in Sweden, and advocated actually a lot for several years for that Sweden should adopt a new target to reduce emissions also from imported consumption, and not just what happens within the country. And now Sweden is actually becoming the first country to do that, although it's not in law yet. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, on this topic, yeah, it's a good question. I think there are, of course, parts, mechanisms that could work in that direction during an economic downturn. But what we've seen historically is basically like an ironclad correlation between income and emissions. So if your income goes up, your emissions goes up. And if your income goes down, your emissions go down. So there might be a small change in maybe something is more unsustainable or but in general, if you have more money and spend more money, that's definitely like it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G behind sort of the driving factors of what is this causing emissions. And people with like high-end environmental values and standards are often high-emitting people because they tend to also have higher incomes. So it's not that simple, unfortunately.
And what can we do? I mean, you talked a bit about Sweden here, and one of the follow-up questions here that Maria, she added in her question was like, what can we do to alleviate the potential negative consequences? Because we may just see us reverting from, choosing more expensive, responsible clothing like the brands of Patagonia, or similarly to fast fashion brands that isn't very responsible in the way of producing clothing. Like, how can we alleviate some of these consequences, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think the people who have like just a little bit of money are really not a big part of the problem, I think. And if sort of unemployment hits and becomes like a huge downturn and that group grows a lot, then there's more people that are not like actively having super high emissions. So I don't think that's sort of any driving factor behind any increased emissions. Is rather how people with a lot of money can handle that without causing a lot of emissions. And one way of doing that is, of course, you can buy it's better to buy a Gucci bag than to buy like 100 bags or something. So definitely like buying quality and buying very high cost items is crowding out other consumption. So that it is a good point that you can buy high quality clothes, etc., because that also makes it's harder for you to consume other things like flying or long-term driving, etc. So that's one part of it. But otherwise, there are things that can be done to facilitate sustainable consumption. The most important things are, of course, like make the grid green. We have that in Sweden, we have it in Norway, in Finland to a very large extent as well, and that's going to help a lot. But then there are things like governments can do, like shift tax incentives so that services are more beneficial. It's cheaper to go to like the hairdresser, take a massage, or go to the opera or wherever, like our theater, than to buy capital intensive goods. So, and there's a long list of, I wrote a report about that as well. There's a long list of policies that could be implemented to try to make consumption more sustainable that can be done on a national level.
Yeah, Eftimia, I see your hand. I just want to add here, I think this is one of the things we talked about here, and one of the things we wanted to leave the audience with was an opportunity, an opening for action, an area that people could look into. And this may not be directly carbon removal, but this may be sort of an area that's maybe overlooked, where we could start to go to work in how could we actually like alleviate some of these some of the impacts that these type of general consumption is having. Like, I think there's even reports that say, you know, like, what do we actually want as human beings? Well, we want to be happy. Great. There is like you're more happy about buying an experience rather than going out and buying a big car, or spending time with the people you love, or actually giving or contributing to others. That's a better way to spend your money if you want to be happy. So there could be some interesting opportunities there, a little bit of a different angle. Anyways, I'm taking this a little bit of a different direction. Eftimia, I'll hand the ball over to you.
Thanks. So in my opinion, the biggest problem is that people, when they want to do something good for the environment, they don't know, for example, which is better. Is this shirt better, or is that shirt better? Is the expensive one? So I think what is happening now a lot on the market is these emerging companies, software companies, which calculate the carbon footprint. And this is extremely important, because if you don't know the difference, then you cannot make a sustainable choice. And having the CO2 footprint of each item is extremely important if you want to foster this sustainable behavior and sustainable choices.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So really, like, giving people the opportunity to choose, actually knowing and choosing for themselves what kind of consumption choices they want, and knowing the impact of that as well. Okay, really great. We do have a couple more questions here, and we're 14 minutes away from the top of the hour here. That's the time that we've scheduled. I'm gonna choose one more question here, and then I'm gonna wrap up the panel. It's been really great having you all, and just want to kind of a last closing question here. Let's see if I can pick a good one. Or maybe we can just kind of take one off the hit. So actually, maybe I'd rather ask all the panelists here, and I invite the participants to participate as well here. Like, you know, you're somebody who's already very well versed in this industry. You know a lot with it's growing out from sort of your area of expertise. What's your takeaway? What are you getting from this conversation that we're having today that you just want to acknowledge and share with the rest of the people on this call?
I mean, I can start. I think for me, it's great to spend time with folks who are working in kind of different aspects of this huge problem, and kind of seeing the sorts of challenges that they're facing. Because I don't get a lot of exposure to that on a day-to-day basis, and it's really useful to kind of see that and have that provide context around the work that we're doing. So I really just appreciate, I think, having been able to hear about, especially Eftimia and Sergey's kind of experiences in a very different part of the carbon dioxide removal market to the part that I work in. Not to say I don't also appreciate all of your input, Robert. It's just, I think there's a little more overlap between our worlds than there is with the other two. So that's been really helpful to me, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. How about you, Sergey, or Robert, or Eftimia? What are you taking away from today?
Maybe I can go first. So there were really great discussion points, and in a way we dig a little bit deeper from different angles into the problems which we're all facing. So I think that gives new perspectives also on where the market is going and what is happening, where are the biggest opportunities, But of course, everything has pros and cons, so it was very nice to see both sides.
I also got kind of really great experience of this past 2 hours, and this atmosphere, you can feel it, like maybe in the early internet days, or like the early solar panels day, like you have some momentum going, and like some best people with different skills come together. So, and I would like to dig into this long list, which Robert actually just briefly pointed out about the technologies which have potential. Maybe I'll just look back the Zoom video recording and research more about this. So I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks to organizers actually to put us together here.
Thank you, Sergey. How about you, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see that there is a lot of interest from various groups, even those who are not engaged already with cover removal, and people are trying to figure out how to best get involved in CDR and in climate in general. And so that's really great to see. And as I said, I really think that all the like 99.9% of the opportunities are still around. So you should definitely just get involved right now.
Thank you. All right, so I also want to share what am I getting away from, what am I taking away from this conversation? I'm taking away that there is so much more to discover for us, and that it's really like that it's a journey for us together to take. Actually, I'm really moved by all of you, by the participation we've seen today, by your generosity of sharing your time here, to all you panelists for really being here, and that this is going to be like an adventure of a lifetime, and we're out to find the best solutions, and we don't even know about them, and they're right out there somewhere, and I'm confident that we're going to work that out. I'm confident we're going to get there. I want to acknowledge you, Robert, for really staying up late. It's 10. I just looked it up. It's 10 minutes to 10 in, I think, where you're at, right, in the evening.
Yeah. That's fine.
So really, thank you for doing that. And I see, you're having I think you're having a lamp in front of you, like kind of like lighting you up here for the panel. Thank you for doing that. That can be hot sometimes, especially if you're in Southeast Asia. So really, thank you for doing that and for your participation. And also, Sergey, you're in Perm, if I'm not mistaken, in Russia. And I know it's also getting a bit late there, and I know you have a family, so really thanks a lot for really making the time to be here. And the same for you, Alex. I recall you were saying, I'm not sure I'm going to make it for this panel. Are we traveling anywhere? No, Alex, we're doing it online. All right, then you can make it. And I think you have kids somewhere in the other rooms, and your dog is around. And really, really thanks for just kind of taking it on and coming on here and contributing with your time and your expertise. That means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means a lot to all the participants as well. And Eftimia, the same for you. I'm not actually so familiar. We didn't interact so much about what you kind of had to go through to be here. Maybe you did. Maybe it's just like a Wednesday afternoon. But I really want to acknowledge that I know you're really busy. So really thank you for taking the time out of your calendar and choosing to be here and being so engaged. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure being here. So I'm just delaying my holiday.
Oh yeah, yes. So to Eftimia, I wish you fantastic holidays. Really go out there and enjoy the Finnish nature. I think that was what was on the agenda. And to everybody else, or to Robert, good night. To everybody else who I don't know where are in the world, if it's afternoon or morning or evening, good night, good morning, and good evening. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here, and I will follow up with an email to the rest of to all the audience group here with a link to the recording, and also I'll be making sure to collect all the social handles and some of the things that we've been talking about. So we have the resources from the conversation here from the panelists, so you can expect an email on that. Thanks you, everyone.
Martin. Thanks on behalf of the listener to the panel. Thanks also to you all and to Martin for setting this up. And I connected to the panelists. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frederick.
Thanks for moderating. That's really great.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Maria. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a fantastic day.
Bye.
Bye.